Hey guys, it's Rocky. Here at We're No Experts, we're always discovering new things and sharing our own spin on how we do it. And if you know me, you know that I've always been obsessed with vintage Star Wars stuff. So recently, I decided to take my first step into a larger world of vintage collecting. In my experience so far, I've found that I could have avoided a lot of common missteps or pitfalls of a rookie collector if only I had done my homework first. I've recently discovered a podcast by David Quinn with 10 important tips for anyone who's thinking about taking on this hobby. I'd like to share with you how I've interpreted these tips and then also tell you how they've helped me reframe my focus in collecting. Let's check it out. Tip number 1. Collect Star Wars only because you love collecting Star Wars. David says that if you're collecting for any other reason, your interest will not last. When I was a kid, the Star Wars trilogy was everything. I spent 99.9999% of my life watching the movies, reading the books, drawing pictures of the characters and the scenes from the movie. I only owned a couple pieces, a couple play sets, and a couple, figures. But I would spend countless hours with the Sears Wish Book, just leafing page by page and dreaming of having every single figure and every single playset and every single sheet set and sweatshirt and whatever said Star Wars on it. So for me, collecting is a childhood dream. Tip number 2, read, research, and learn. David said that before you start collecting, you should really equip yourself with as much knowledge as possible. And boy, do I wish I had done that before I started collecting. When I first started, I would just get on eBay and kind of, I'd see something I liked and I'd buy it or, bid on it and try to get it if I could. So what that caused me was a lot of mistakes, and I ended up with a lot of figures that I don't really want. So just remember when you start collecting that whatever you're collecting is going to cost money, obviously, but it also takes up space. And man, space is a major premium here in New York City. So you can imagine me trying to find places in my apartment to store this stuff. So today, if you're going to start collecting, you want to avoid compulsive decisions and learn what you want to focus on and just hone in on that. So there's a lot of material out there to help you get prepared and equip yourself with knowledge before you start collecting. One of my favorite books is this one here, The Ultimate Guide to Star Wars Action Figures, 1977 to 1985 by Mark Bellomo. There's several other books out there. You can check out, Amazon or even other bookstores out in the real world. And I also joined quite a few groups or communities on Facebook that are focused specifically on vintage Star Wars figures. And in most of the groups you can actually buy and sell. And then there are other websites, there's countless websites out there with vast amounts of knowledge. Just Google vintage Star Wars collecting and you're well on your way to the new hobby. So one day I realized, you know what, I'm really not happy with a lot of the stuff that I bought. And I wanted to figure out why, if there was something I was doing wrong or whatever. So I sat down and did a lot of research, and in doing the research I realized what I needed to do was just really narrow my focus. So now I have very specific criteria for what I collect. I'm collecting only loose figures in the most pristine condition with their original accessory whenever possible. When I first started collecting, I noticed a lot of unusual, unfamiliar terms, really strange acronyms and abbreviations, and I had no idea what some of these listings were talking about. So I realized I need to learn the terms and lingo of the community I'm collecting in. Now that I'm able to speak the same language as my fellow collectors, it makes my searching much more enjoyable, much more productive, and much more rewarding. So a way that equipping myself with as much knowledge as possible really paid off was a day when I was shopping out in the wild, which is what collectors call shopping in the real world, not online. And I was at this flea market and going through this old bin of, old vintage Star Wars action figures that were not in great shape at all. And they were pretty cheap. But knowing what I knew, I Notice this little guy. This is a hollow cheek Tusken Raider action figure. He's a more rare variation of the Tusken Raider or the Sand People. If I hadn't been equipped with the knowledge, I would have let this slip through my hands, and I'm glad I didn't, because I had my first little personal victory that day. Tip number 3, practice patience. David says that you'll find what you want at the time and price that's right for you, and that you should only add pieces that you care about and add them only once. I get so much zen out of that. So, as you know, I bought a lot of stuff when I started out that I don't really want and don't really need, so I'm probably going to end up selling it anyways. So now I am practicing the patience to focus on only buying one piece at a time as perfect as I can possibly find it. Tip number 4, be particular about what you buy. So David says, he advises that you don't buy everything and anything that comes your way. You just buy what genuinely interests you and excites you and makes you happy. So looking back at my experience, I interpret that as don't buy items just because other collectors are buying them or searching for them, and don't get caught up in trying to keep up with everyone else. eBay auctions can become very addicting, so I've learned not to treat them like a competition and to not get hooked on the endorphin of winning at an auction. I bought a lot of figures when I started, thinking that if they're in bad shape, I could just repair them or get some of the same action figure and maybe Frankenstein together a perfect piece. What I didn't realize is that's a bad idea, because it takes time and you need the space and the tools to do that. So now I just want to display my figures and admire them. This next tip I actually started when I started collecting, so I'm feeling really good about it. Tip number 5 is keep a record of your purchases. Yes, I did that, and I'm so glad I did it, because as you know, I was buying a lot of stuff in the beginning, but I'm able to track it all because I kept a record from the very first piece that I bought. So doing this from day one, it was easy for me to track my purchases from any website like eBay, Etsy, Facebook, but also, you know, anything I bought out in the wild, like, you know, at a store that gives you a receipt that you eventually lose. So what I did to start the record was I just started with a simple spreadsheet in Excel, and it's, you know, evolved from, you know, one page to, I don't know how many pages yet, but it's probably a lot. I haven't printed it out. But make the spreadsheet. It'll help you track your expenses and your inventory. So if you decide to sell stuff down the road, you have inventory and all the expenses listed. It'll be very easy to get that posting up and get an adequate amount of money back from what you put into it. But this is the ultimate way to keep organized, and I make sure that I update it regularly. And then I also thought about it, it's probably a good thing to have for insurance if you ever have to make an insurance claim, right? So tip number 6, sell the stuff you don't want so that you can buy what you do want. I kind of feel like I've been talking about this all the way up to this point, that I've tended to buy items for the sake of the excitement, and it just resulted in accumulating, not really collecting, and I wasn't, you know, focused yet on a well-honed collection, so I do have a lot of stuff that I don't love, and as I said before, the stuff you don't love takes up a lot of precious space. So I think one of my next steps in my collecting journey would be to take up tip number 6 and sell the stuff that I don't love so that I can get some of the stuff that I haven't gotten yet, and maybe we'll make another episode about that. So tip number 7, find a mentor. That would have helped. I probably could have used a mentor when I started collecting. This definitely would have helped me in the beginning, for sure. I've gotten plenty of advice from members of the Facebook groups that I've joined, I've found that most people in those groups are very happy to help, very supportive and encouraging. The one thing to keep in mind when you do that is to be mindful and grateful. So you want to respect their time that they take to give you the advice, and also really, be grateful for their expertise. Maybe someday I'll find a mentor, because it always helps to find someone to teach you and steer you away from the follies of rookie mistakes in anything in life, right? Tip number 8, travel outside of your state and outside of your comfort zone. So I haven't really done this yet, and I hadn't even really thought about this until I went over David's list. I think as a collector, that's probably one of the next steps I'm going to take, is actually attend a toy fair or a toy show, or even something like really big like Star Wars Celebration. There's a couple shows I'm looking at right now. There's the ICCC in Franklin, Tennessee, and there's also the Cincinnati Toy Show, which is the home, Cincinnati is the home of Kenner, which was the original manufacturer of the vintage Star Wars collection. So that could be really exciting. But I can see how these shows will be beneficial to a collector. I have actually discovered them just through my Facebook communities and my own searching. And I found that in some collectors' podcasts, they actually have attended past shows and interviewed experts at those shows. So even if you can't go to those things, there's resources out there where you can gain knowledge from the people who go to these shows on a regular basis. Tip number 9, join the community. As I said earlier, I've joined a few Facebook groups for vintage Star Wars collectors where I've gained a lot of knowledge and advice. I think this tip kind of encompasses more of a 360 holistic approach to community, including digital communities like Facebook or forums on collector sites, but also venturing out to groups near you where people in the real world actually meet and enjoy the hobby together. So like here in New York, there's a group called the Empire State Collectors Club. And I feel like if I continue with this hobby, that's kind of a natural step to maybe look into that, knock on the door, meet some people, and enjoy collecting with other people in the real world, and possibly buy and sell with them as well. Tip number 10, give back. So David suggests that you become an active part of the hobby of collecting. Not just by collecting, but also getting involved in all aspects of collecting, even like volunteering at a local group event. He says to share your enthusiasm for the hobby with anyone that you can, and share knowledge of the hobby. Wait a minute. Hey, that's what I'm doing, right? Ah, look at me giving back. I hope you like this crash course in collecting vintage Star Wars toys. I hope you find the 10 tips useful in collecting vintage Star Wars toys, or whatever you're into. And if you have any questions, be sure to put them in the comment section below. We're no experts, but we'll do our best to get you an answer. Once you've come up for air after hours and hours and hours of researching vintage Star Wars toy collecting, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please like this video, and don't forget to subscribe to We're No Experts. Until next time, bye!